In the past, I realize I've done largely negative coverage of RWBY. It's not that I suddenly hate everything about the show, it's just that's how it's happened. I have my why I'm done with RWBY rant video. I have a somber goodbye tribute to the show itself, and I have the manga video where I'm pretty much just comparing the manga to the show. You know what? Today, let's have something positive. Something positive about the show, because contrary to what my videos have shown, I don't hate everything about RWBY right now. I really don't. Because there is one character who I still genuinely love 100%. Who is the best written and most consistent character of the entire RWBY world. Now, who is this character? Well,
ladies, Ice Queen, always a pleasure. Neo, if you would.
that's right. The character who I believe is objectively the best written and most consistent in the entire world of RWBY is a character who doesn't even talk and who's had less than 20 minutes of screen time as of Volume 6. Why is that, you might ask? Well, the biggest problem facing RWBY as a show is the inconsistencies. It's fairly obvious at this point that the writers are going volume by volume instead of writing the show as its own overarching narrative. They don't check over their own work, and thus characters are wildly inconsistent in personality, in motivations, and even in how they act and speak to one another. However, with Neo, who has had less than 20 minutes of screen time, it is fairly easy for them to check over what sort of action she might take in Volume 6 as of this point in the story. So, okay, Roman got eaten by a Grim, Lord Farquaad style, after Neo Mary Poppins'd off the plane. What would she do? Well, Neo simply doesn't really care about figuring out the truth to Roman's death. She doesn't seem to particularly care about the plan. All she cared about was being by Roman's side. So, of course, she's just going to take down anyone she believes to be responsible for Roman's death. That includes Cinder, and that includes RWBY. So, from this about 30 seconds of screen time, the writers can logically assume that if Neo were to appear in the show again, she would be seeking revenge. Now, why she hadn't appeared in the show till now is actually quite easily explained due to the way she presents herself in combat up until Volume 6. Neo is a very patient woman. Just take a look at any of her fights, or pseudo-fights, she had in the show. When on the highway with Roman, she didn't attack her opponent, yet instead waited for them to make a move so that she and Roman could escape. With Yang, it was almost the exact same, except she played slightly more offensively. But still mostly on defense, waiting for her opponent to make a mistake so that she could have an opening to attack and knock Yang unconscious. Same with RWBY on the aircraft. Neo didn't really attack RWBY all that much until she kicked her. Why? Well, that's because Neo had found an opening to attack RWBY. So given this, it is safe to assume that Neo, like in combat, is a very patient woman. So she waits and she waits for Volume 4 and Volume 5, because, as knowledge would have it, Roman didn't have plans to attack Haven. He probably would have if he hadn't met his unfortunate end. But since he doesn't have Haven plans, nor were they ever mentioned, it is safe to assume that Neo did not know when Salem's group was going to attack Haven, just that they were. So she goes back to Haven, she waits, and she waits. And then, suddenly, out of the blue, they attacked. And she decides to use her connections to discern who might be left, what was the fallout of the fight. And as luck would have it, she would find Cinder. Now, some people say that her fighting Cinder in an offensive manner contradicts her character. However, think about this. If Neo has been seeking revenge against Cinder and her group all this time for Roman's death, and then suddenly, out of the blue, your objective for vengeance comes walking right through the door, you would attack them, most certainly, no matter how patient you were. And Cinder was alone, too. She didn't have her posse with her. She was definitely crippled. So, of course, Neo decided to go on the offensive to beat down her weakened opponent and possibly kill her. However, Cinder offers an alternative. They can team up, go to Atlas, and kill RWBY. She honestly can't say no, as she discovers that Cinder is very powerful in the ways of magic. Also, if she teams up with Cinder, she can get 2 birds with 1 stone. Maybe she can even have them kill each other. Who knows? And thus, her patience is restored and she teams up with Cinder. It's a simple revenge story for Neo, and it works. Also, it's consistent. Cinder can't make up her mind as to whether or not she wants to kill RWBY. I wouldn't even be surprised in Volume 7 if she suddenly decides to not kill RWBY and do something else. Ren also had sought revenge, but really it was just plopped in the middle of Volume 4 to pad out the runtime because reasons. Oh right, I'm supposed to be positive for this video. Now, let's go back to Neo. Indeed, Neo has been very consistent in her behavior, and her actions in Volume 6 are easily understandable, even without comments from the peanut gallery in the show. And also, Neo has a very distinct advantage when it comes to the inconsistencies of RWBY. She cannot physically talk, and thus, she is the one character in RWBY who can never contradict herself with dialogue, which is wonderful. So, Neo has more of a chance of coming out of the show unscathed and still an A+. Now, no character could ever be complete without a backstory. It is the foundation of a complete and successful character, and it should translate well into who they are as a person today. And, well, not a lot of RWBY characters have backstories, per se. I can count them off all on one hand. And actually, Roman and Neo are 2 of those characters who supposedly have a backstory due to the world that Rooster Teeth has set up. Their supposed backstory isn't in a giant info dump in the show or takes up an entire episode, but rather it's for avid fans of this and watchers of the series to make their own speculation as to what it could be. This theorized backstory is that Neo and Roman are 2 of the children pictured in the Brunswick Farms photo. They somehow escaped and now are living the high life as crime lords. From a purely technical standpoint, zooming in on the photo reveals that the younger boy has orange hair and what appear to be dark-colored eyes, which definitely fits Roman's description. The girl, on the other hand, is obviously a brunette, and if you zoom a little bit to her left side, you can see a lighter highlight, which definitely fits Neo's description. Of course, from a purely logical standpoint, if this is their true backstory, then it makes a lot of sense looking at their past scenes together. If they've only had each other this entire time, of course, being with each other is what makes them the happiest. Just looking at their past scenes when it wasn't supposed to be a serious situation, they were always smiling. They were happiest when they were together performing criminal escapades and wrecking stuff. Also, if you were what appears to be an 8-year-old boy and a 5-year-old girl who have no family and no wealth to their name, it makes sense why Roman and Neo went to the life of crime to essentially survive. And these are just assumptions and stuff using photos, comparisons, and logic to determine what their backstory is. But what about dialogue? Well, since Neo doesn't speak, we have to turn to Roman. Now, Roman is a character who I've always theorized to be deflecting what he's actually thinking with humor and a smirk on his face. However, there is one section of RWBY where he appears to drop all of that and makes his true frustrations known. Unfortunately, it's only a few moments before his untimely demise. So after Neo was Mary Poppins off the plane, Roman completely loses it and starts beating a 16-year-old girl with his cane. I feel as though this is actually the only time where Roman ever made his true feelings and true thoughts known about the world, as his demeanor completely changes from having some sort of humor and sass and long-distance combat to close combat and speaking in a manner that would suggest he's not happy. This scene can really only be shown and not explained. So, please don't copyright me, Rooster Teeth. This is for educational purposes, and it's not Volume 5 clips.
If you can't beat 'em!
A few moments later.
You got Spirit Red, but this is the real world! The real world is cold! The real world doesn't care about spirit! You want to be a hero? Then play the part and die like every other huntsman in history! Ow! As for me, I'll do what I do best. Lie, steal, cheat!
Honestly, from Roman's sudden change in demeanor, it seems he thought that Neo was legitimately going to die. After all, she is flying into a swarm of man-eating birds, so her chances were not looking great. And he took that out on Ruby Rose, the person who caused it. A little bit understandable. By kicking the literal bazongas out of her. Also, the dialogue he speaks matches up surprisingly well with what happened at Brunswick Farms. First line, "The world is cold." It seems as though, from the journals that Maria Calavera read, the whole entire event took place in winter. Bartleby wanted to make it through the winter without a huntsman, and thus that's where his idea for the apathy came in, to take the edge off of everyone. Next line, "The real world doesn't care about spirit." Now, this could very well be referring to the apathy grim. After all, they literally make you apathetic to everything. No matter how strong of a spirit you might have, you will eventually succumb to the apathy grim if you don't get away as fast as possible. It appears this last line of dialogue is a direct stab at this guy, the huntsman who came to work for Brunswick Farms, or just huntsman in general. Since this guy was found in the tunnels beneath Brunswick Farms instead of in a bed, like a lot of the people, it is safe to assume that he, quote, tried to play the hero and get rid of the apathy, a decision which ultimately cost him his life. If Roman did indeed witness this event, then that event probably would have stuck with him throughout his entire life. He wouldn't want to play the hero and make a decision that could very likely lead to his death. And so when Cinder extended her hand out for him to join, he accepted, as this is the bet that he wanted to take for himself and Neo. This was the path that he decided would lead to the most likely outcome of them still being alive by the end of it all. And of course, that didn't pan out, as, Roman died. So what's left for Neo to do? She lost her single light, her single friend. So now she's going to take it out on the people who she believes to be responsible. Because if she hadn't flown off, then Roman's negative emotions wouldn't have amplified enough for a Grimm to get him. And if Cinder hadn't made this plan, he would still be alive. So that's why she's going after specifically RWBY and Cinder. So there you have it. These are all my reasonings as to why Neo is the best written and most consistent character, a total and complete A+, as of RWBY Volume 6. Oh yeah, and the only reason why I would ever watch the Rooster Teeth RWBY ever again is if Neo kills Cinder. Please, girl, I'm counting on you. I honestly don't care about anything else at this point in the show.